Hey, it's Susie here. What's the number one money mistake women business owners make? And more importantly, how do you avoid it? A brand new guide reveals the surprising financial oversight every woman entrepreneur needs to avoid. This crucial insight can mean the difference to your business's long-term success and its scalability. And you can download the free guide now at moneymistakesolutions.com. That's moneymistakesolutions.com. Hey there, welcome to the HerBusiness podcast, the show for women entrepreneurs who are ready to grow their businesses without the fear of overwhelm or burnout. I'm your host, Susie Daphnis, and today we're diving into a topic that's on my list of things that I want to get better at. And I believe it's actually crucial for every woman wanting to grow a business. It's not how to create great systems or how to be a better marketer or how to have the best team. It's actually the power of self-kindness in business growth. And in this episode, we're joined by the incredible Erica Webb, a somatic movement educator, self-kindness advocate, and the founder of Self-Kind. Her work is all about helping women, especially those running their businesses, to find physical and mental peace through somatic movement. We're going to talk more about what that is in just a moment, through self-kindness and through community. So let's head into this interview and uncover just how we weave self-kindness into our business practices to not only thrive, but also to do that with grace and ease. Here we go. Hey, Erica, welcome to the show.
Hey, Susie, it is such a pleasure and an honour to be here.
I am excited for this conversation. This isn't the sort of conversation I have every day, but it's such an important part of growing and scaling a business is our own well-being. So shall we dive right in?
Yes, let's do it.
Alrighty. So I think that we both agree that how we feel impacts how we think, and how we think also impacts how we feel. And that Self-Kind, you focus on supporting individuals, mostly women, I expect. Would that be right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. To experience more physical and mental peace. And you do that through somatic movement, self-kindness, and community. I took that straight off your website.
Perfect.
So I just mentioned a word, which is somatic movement. Would you just explain that for us before we continue?
Yes, and somatic movement's a term that's being kind of thrown around a lot at the moment. It's actually had a bit of it's having its moment, I think.
Okay.
I've been a somatics teacher for quite a long time, I think like maybe close to 10 years. And really when we say somatic, what we mean is of the body. Mm-hmm. My understanding is it's actually a Greek word,
it is.
soma. Yeah, mm-hmm. Soma is a Greek word. And the way that I use it in the sort of modality that I teach is thinking of the body as being a complete experience from inside out. So not just a body with parts, but a body that thinks, a body that feels, a body that senses. So it's this way of thinking of ourselves as being a body-mind combined, which I love.
I love that too. And it seems very holistic, which I know is very much your vibe. So tell us about what you do. How is it that you work with women? And I know some of those are business owners, just like those listening today. How is it that you work with them? And also, what does self-kind or being self-kind mean?
Yes. Okay. So I do work with a lot of business owners actually, which is interesting. It's not my niche, but I certainly get a lot of business owners. And I think it's because of the pressure that we put on ourselves, but we can maybe come back to that. So at the heart of everything I do is self-kindness. And for me, that really is this sense of recognizing our inherent worth. And so the way that I work with women, and I do work with some men, but mostly women, is in kind of refinding that sense of innate worthiness. I do this mainly through movement. So I'm a registered counselor as well as a movement coach. And, you know, I teach yoga and Pilates as well as somatics, but somatics is the main thing. And really, sometimes it just looks like a movement class, right? But the thing that we're getting to is this capacity to actually listen to ourselves, because so much of the time, the thing that we're listening to is just the thoughts that might actually be borrowed from somewhere else and not actually truly reflective of reality or what we want for ourselves. And so we find ourselves, I think, very much stuck in these loops of feeling like we should be doing things, feeling a lot of guilt. I work a lot with guilt and shame, and often around our own self-care. So feeling like we do self-care to quell the guilt of I'm not looking after myself.
Mm.
And so for me, it's very much about helping women to look at their humanity, like really look at their humanity straight in the eyes and say, being human does not make me wrong. Being human does not make me bad. And I am enough. And so we move and we sense the body and we give ourselves time to slow down and to feel and to notice what's true for us. And in that process, shed some tension, learn how to read and respond to our nervous system, and learn how to be kind in the way that we think and in the way that we respond to unkind thought patterns, which are there for all of us all the time in various forms.
That is so interesting, because I know I've certainly been guilty of being very kind to others and anything but kind to myself in my thinking or how I treat myself. I love what you just said there. And I'm sure we'll go into that a little more in what we're talking about today. In fact, you have a wonderful podcast. I want to give you a shout out for that now. And it is called Self-Kind. Is that right?
It is, yes. Self-Kind with Erica Webb. Everything is all the same.
Everything is self-kind. Great. And so we're going to put a link to the podcast in our show notes. But in preparing for today's episode, I went to all your episodes and I thought, oh, well, let me see what Erica's been talking about lately. And I've picked up some of those ideas and threaded them into what we're talking about today. But highly recommend checking out the show. I was very honored to be a guest.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, probably now.
It was
a little
right
while ago,
towards the beginning. It might have been 2020.
Oh, my goodness. So one of the things, Erica, that I've been encouraging our members to do as we think about our schedule for the year, as we plan our marketing campaigns and all the, dragons we're going to slay, is to build what we call free days into their schedules. And I know for me and for many of them, things can happen when we decide to bring more self-care into our days, that we can start to actually feel guilty about taking time off from our work and perhaps taking days off when our team is working. You mentioned that you work with guilt, so I thought we might start there. In fact, I was with a friend on the weekend, very successful business owner, has decided this year she's going to take Fridays off, but not without a whole lot of guilt. That, she's like, still feeling, even though she's had this business for 20 years, even though she works her tail off, just like so many of us do, just feeling that little bit of guilt of taking that time. How do we navigate that guilt?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always like to explore with people, is it actually guilt or is it shame? Because guilt suggests that we are doing something wrong, right? Whereas shame suggests that we might be wrong or bad for doing something. And I actually think more of the time we are experiencing shame in those scenarios. And here's the reason why. And it's probably, it might not be what anyone thinks. And this, I can't take credit for this work. This is Brene Brown's work on shame, and it's really powerful stuff. But what happens is we all kind of walk around with ideas of, and probably unspoken ideas of what it means to be a successful businesswoman, right? And we kind of have this sense of how we want to be perceived. I want to be perceived as busy. I want to be perceived as fully booked out, wealthy, whatever the words might be. And so when we do something that actually misaligns us with that way that we would like to be perceived, that can make us feel real weird. Because as soon as you take a Friday off, you're like, oh, what if people see me as not those things, right? What if people see me as lazy or selfish or unproductive or not as successful as I am? And so that can cause us to feel really uncomfortable. And a lot of those ideas aren't ours, right? So I think as women, we have that extra layer of we should be selfless. This is what society tells us. It is the best possible trait for a woman is to be selfless. And I call BS on that, but that is absolutely what we are told. And so we are fighting against messaging that says, in order to be good and in order to get this right, you should be selfless, you should be busy, you should be just as tired as everybody else, just as stressed as everybody else. And so to claim back and say, you know what, I don't want that to be my truth. I don't want to be stressed and wear that as an honor. I don't want to be overwhelmed and wear that as an honor. I don't want to put everybody else before me. That can be very vulnerable because it goes against so much of what we've been told we have to have and possess and display in order to be good people. And at the end of the day, we all want to be good, right? Like we all want to be loved and accepted and respected by our peers. And I think that that's where that gets a little grindy, because we're like, well, what if they don't respect me because I choose to go against the grain? Because it still is, sadly, against the grain to, look after our needs. For as much lip service as it gets, it's still kind of a bit, it's not done.
That's so important. And I think for me and for everybody listening, one of the things I'm committed to is, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if we're going through these waves of shame, to really start to work against the grain in a way that's going to support us, and to, maybe have that inner voice, but have the support, whether it's through organizations like yours or just through having other women who are experiencing the same thing, and having a place where we can voice the fact that I've decided to do this, for instance, have these free days, and I feel like I don't want people to think, oh, who does she think she is, or to think badly of me, and for us to do it anyway, right?
Yeah, and
Not
that's
to be
actually the
stopped.
antidote. That's exactly it. We have to go, oh, those thoughts are happening, and I'm still really committed to looking after myself, so I guess I'm just going to let it be uncomfortable.
Yeah. One of the other things that we navigate as business owners is we're often looking at what the competition is doing, perhaps even what our peers are doing. And there's a little bit of comparison that happens. And there's something you wrote that I want to reference the exact words, because I thought this was really profound. You said that playing this comparison game, chews at your joy and spits it out. Can you speak to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I recorded that particular podcast episode, I was drawing from an experience of something outside of business, but it absolutely applies. But I was talking about the fact that I water ski. And I'm a decent skier, but I'm not as good as some of the other people I ski with. And I asked somebody to take a photo, like a video of me while I was skiing. And when I was skiing, I felt like I was flying, right? Like a million miles an hour. I felt like I was, I probably looked so like it looked epic from the outside. But the video really just looked like, oh, there's that lady just having a ski, right? Like it was very much not representative of how it felt. And it really caused me to go, oh, how often do we do that? We're having an inner experience of joy or satisfaction or contentment. And then we look outside and we go, oh, but what should it look like? We invalidate our experience because we're kind of worried about maybe how it looks from the outside, or that fear of maybe they have it right and I got it wrong. So there's this sense that maybe we can't trust our own experience. And I think that that is very easy to happen as business owners, because there's so much that we can compare against, social media following, revenue, way people come across on video, all these metrics that we can say, well, objectively, they have more than me. Even if we don't want everything that goes along with their more. And so I think that the comparison is very, very human and very automatic. And so it's the same thing with the shame conversation of being able to step back and say, oh, this is really interesting. I'm comparing myself right now to Susie because I want to be like her, or it makes, I see things in her that I really admire as a human and as a business owner. And it's not fair for me to compare myself to her for all of these reasons. So we have to be almost like willing to have these conversations with ourselves in the same way that we would with our best friend. Because we wouldn't sit down with our best friend and be like, yeah, you're right. You should compare yourself against Susie. She's so much better than you. She's so much, like that. We would never do that.
No.
Could you imagine having that conversation with a friend? But it's what we do to ourselves. And so it's being willing to have a different conversation with yourself, one that is tender and kind and compassionate, and doesn't invalidate the discomfort of, or like the automatic nature of comparison as well, because you're human. You're going to do it. You're going to compare. You're going to have doubt. You're going to have shame. So give it some space to just have a voice as well.
I'm thinking about you skiing and you watching back the footage. And I have a feeling that if I watch myself dancing at a club, that I might have that same thing. It's like, really? I felt amazing.
That's not what it felt like.
It felt amazing. What? You mean it didn't look amazing?
That's
Oh
it.
my God.
That's it. And we probably do that all the time, right? But yeah, can we prioritize the inner experience? That's the question.
Right. That's a really great distinction. Yeah, but we don't always. And
We don't.
I love that we're digging into some things like, me, I'm very passionate about business and helping women grow their business, but I'm as passionate about their personal development and know that what's going on up here in their minds is so reflected in the results that they get most of the time. Which leads me into another little area I want to talk about. And that is, as you would know, having been a member for a while, that the idea of showing up and speaking up are very core to our belief on what helps you get connected with other people and it helps you grow your business. But we can often shrink. Whether we're comparing or not, we may fail to become more visible because we have this fear of we don't want to be the tall poppy, we have some sort of imposter syndrome. So we dim our light and play down our accomplishments. And, there can be layers and layers to what's going on there. But I'd love for you to say a little bit about how doing that, shrinking, making ourselves smaller, is actually a disservice not only to us, but to others around us.
Yes. Oh, what a big topic. I think that it becomes a disservice because we let the thoughts win when they actually don't really have as much power as we think. And I think sometimes we feel like when we're nervous in those scenarios that our body's kind of giving us away almost. Like there's this feeling of I'm so uncomfortable with my nervousness, or I'm so uncomfortable with the discomfort of being seen and perhaps being perceived again in a way that I don't want to be perceived, or being misunderstood, or fumbling my words. And it can feel like our body's response to that, the churning tummy, the racing heart, is like a really good reason to put on the brakes. And that is fair because it is literally your nervous system trying to keep you safe. Because in a very primitive way, we want to just stay safe by avoiding criticism, by avoiding threat, by avoiding anything that might have us excluded from our community. And so, yeah, your body is actually kind of trying to get you to stop. But we have to be able to get outside of that and say, no, like what is actually important to me? And what is important in the world? Is it more important that my work, stays safe inside of me and I stay safe inside my, box? Or is it more important that I give this work to the world, knowing that it's not for everyone, knowing that, yes, I will face some level of rejection, it's going to hurt, but trusting that you can handle it? Because I think when we don't allow ourselves out of that box, when we don't allow ourselves to be seen, what we're essentially saying is, I can't handle the outcome of not a completely positive response. And, find me a business owner that's had nothing but positive responses.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. And so I think that we risk not building our self-trust muscle, and we risk not building a legacy of sorts, by just choosing to stay comfortable, even when that's actually deeply uncomfortable. Because there's like both of them are uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable just to keep staying in that sort of smaller space, and it's uncomfortable to step outside of it. And so it's like, well, which discomfort leads you where you want to go? And the other thing that I would say about that is that we can nudge ourselves out of that with kindness too, whereas I think we often try to do it with shame, with guilt, with pressure, with push, with force, with lots of, ugliness. And so learning how to do that with a kind little nudge, we can be kind and very brave at the same time. Kindness doesn't keep you small. It helps you to kind of step into the fullness of who you are.
I love that you said that, because it can be thought of as it's a soft skill.
Yeah.
If you're really going to grow your business, it just sounds soft. But I think it's a key that unlocks so much. I was just listening to what you were saying about the oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. All right, I'm just going to make a note there about I'll come back to that. I've lost it. Never mind. It'll come back. It'll come back. Oh my gosh. No, it's not coming back.
New question.
New question, and we'll just zip that bit out. Let me just circle back for a sec. We'll keep going. I don't feel like I wrapped that up well, though. Oh, well, we'll fix it up. Are you happy to move on?
Yeah, always.
Okay. All right. So here we go. I want to talk about making decisions. And as business owners, we're doing that all day. What marketing campaigns are going to run? What social media images? What am I going to wear to that meeting? What do I need to tell the staff, et cetera, et cetera? We're making decisions all the time. And I know for me, one of the things that's been a pressure for me that I haven't been particularly kind with myself about is making mistakes, either in hiring or in my marketing or in a system or process, or just having things not turn out the way that I wanted. And underlying that is a sense of wanting to get things perfect. Now, more often than not, they're not perfect, but I have super high expectations of myself. And I found that to be something that's quite common in a lot of business owners, especially those of us who've had success in a career before we started our business, or we've had kicked a few big goals, and then suddenly we expect ourselves to perform at the highest level every time. Perfectionism is something that I know that you speak about. And again, I can't imagine that it fits into the kindness bucket. So what have you found to be the unhealthy consequences of our perfectionism?
Perfectionism's huge. And I think, I actually think so many of us struggle with this. But the thing is, if we are really committed to being perfect, then we're very much actually committing to constantly feeling like we don't measure up, because we will never be perfect. The very state of being human is to be imperfect, to be fallible, because we're operating in circumstances that we can't always control. And I think our perfectionism often has us looking at outcomes, which often aren't in our control, right? We can really only control the things that we do rather than how they create an outcome in the world. And so to be committed to being perfect is to be committed to being constantly not enough, because you just cannot be as a human. And I often see this and I saw this in myself, and I've had to work through this a lot, and I see it in others, where we use our perfectionism as a way of like earning our own respect and earning our own love. It's like, when I'm just perfect enough, then I won't be unkind to myself anymore because I'll have nothing to be unkind about. But the inevitability is you get something wrong because you're human, and some days you don't get enough sleep, and some days people cut you off in traffic, and some days you haven't eaten enough. There's all these reasons why we might make mistakes, or we might do something that wasn't really a mistake, but that just led to a different outcome than what we'd hoped. And so, I talk about kindness, but really, I guess what I'm talking about often kind of interchangeably is compassion, to be able to look at ourselves and say, you know what, making mistakes is really hard, and it makes me feel very uncomfortable, and it makes me doubt myself sometimes. But it is not my perfect existence in the world that is a prerequisite for me treating myself with respect. That's the difference, right? Whereas when we treat ourselves with respect only when we get it right, then we end up on this roller coaster that says, I have to be good enough to be able to treat myself with respect. And then I make a mistake and I talk to myself like trash. And then, we're on this constant, we literally cannot get out of that if we're committed to the perfect idea. And it is just an idea. It's not a reality for anyone.
I feel like in the 3 or 4 topics that we've just spoken about, that we may have just opened up some wounds, and I think that there's such deep work that's available to be done for us to heal some of those things. And so in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you how people can work with you to get the support they need to unhook some of these things from their everyday thinking and the way that they are showing up in the world, so that they can, build that self-kindness and start to take the pressure down on themselves and feel that peace that you're speaking of. But before we do that, I do want to ask you some questions as a business owner. How long have you been in business, Erica?
Like 13 years.
13 years. Great. Yay.
Yay. It was a little more hobbyish at the beginning, but online in this current form for 4.
Before. And now I know you've got a new course that you recently ran very successfully. You're running it for a second time. And by the time this goes to air, it may have started or not. But I wanted to talk about you introducing a new product or service, because you had a very different model for your business. You've moved to this online world. You've got the membership, and now you've got this online course. So what I'd love to know is about your thinking process in injecting a new revenue stream in the business. Like, what inspired that? What were the challenges? And what were the wins associated with changing up your business model?
Yes, fabulous question. So I moved online in 2019, and that was just with a membership. And at the time I'm going to say just, but I don't mean it in a negative way. I was just a movement teacher. That was my offering. And so it was a library of movement videos. My background was in behavioral science, and so I always incorporated a bit of the mindset stuff. But then I also became a registered counselor. And when I added that arm to my business and started seeing people more one-on-one for that, I realized that there was I guess a bit of a gap in what I was doing, because the body stuff is kind of like one thing, and then the mind stuff is kind of can be seen as sort of something else. But really where my sweet spot is where they overlap. Because, the way we started this conversation, how we think impacts how we feel, and vice versa. And so in sort of like adding another product was very much in response to the gap that I felt I could feel in my own business. And for me, that impact of that was actually huge. And, as we're recording, I've only run this course one time. So, time will tell. But it was the biggest launch I've ever had in terms of numbers. And to me, it showed me that, the people in my audience don't just want one thing. The membership that I had is fabulous, but not everybody wants to be involved in something that just keeps going and going and going. So this really more was a product to address a very particular problem, I guess, which my membership kind of does, but not in the same way, because it's more of I want to show up, I want to move every week, and this is the portal that I log into to do that. Whereas the course is very much more like, we've got 6 weeks together, we're, taking this journey from here to here. And that wasn't something that my business kind of had. It was either you work with me one-on-one or we work together in the membership, but it's a bit hands-off. So this was kind of that in-between ground where I can work with more people for whom, they maybe don't need the one-on-one sort of level of support that I offer in my sessions, but they want more than they would get in the membership.
Right. And they want a quick win. Like, I can do this for 6 weeks. It's like, I don't want my card charged every single month for ongoing. I'm not looking for community. I think that's really, really smart. And to recognize that, because sometimes, we create our business model for simplicity, or we think, yep, recurring revenue, that's the way I want to go. Yes, love a bit of recurring revenue. I've had that model in my business for a long time. But I think to then recognize, well, there's a part of my audience that I'm just not reaching because they don't want the continuity. They just want this solution. And I figure in 6 weeks' time, I can get them, like you said, from here to there. Very, very good. Well, I'm wishing you best of luck with the course. And of course, anytime, just reach out for support in any part of that process. Are you finding that, or did you find from the first one that people then just naturally became members, or did it work the other way around?
It worked a little bit in both directions. My gut feel is that they're going to be different people, but I
Got
don't
it.
know. I don't know
But
that for
that's
sure
good to
yet.
know too, right? It's like I
Yeah.
have this thing that I offer for this ideal client, but this thing is for the other ideal client. And I've seen that very
Yeah.
much in our own business. It's a very different person who will do our reach retreat in Hawaii or the mastermind or the membership
Mm,
or any of those things. And as long as we know that, and as long as I guess there's some commonality so that we don't have crazily different messaging having
yeah.
to go out about what we do, that can totally work. Now, you've been in business 13 years. What have you found to be the most essential elements to keeping you in the game
Mm,
and moving forward? Has there
mm.
been anything that kind of stands out?
I mean, the question of whether to stay in the game or not comes up regularly to me,
Yeah. Mm.
because there are days where I'm like, "Whoa, this is harder probably than fronting up to an office and just getting a job done." But to me, it's always been community. So I've been a member of her business for,
Huh.
I couldn't actually remember how long. I think it was probably 2018 or 2019 that I joined, and that was really when I started to move my business from being a hobby to being a real business. Um, and for me, I think that has been the absolute key. Um, because when you look from the outside, like I think I work from home, I work alone. And so it can be very lonely.
Yeah.
And to be able to see that other people are doing the same thing is so helpful because there's no one really in my real world existence that does this. I mean, I've made friends like that as a result of the networking that I've done. But for the most part, the people that I hang out with, they go to a job and they get a paycheck
Mm.
and so for me, that's probably been the biggest part. And also understanding why I show up for it all the time. I think that's been really important because there have been, like I said, there are days, and they're not irregular, but they're not so regular that it's concerning. That I go like, why? Why am I doing this? Because some days it feels really hard.
Mm.
But I also always come back to my why, and for
Mm.
some, for part of that, it's like part of my why is that I want to be able to drop my kids off at school and pick them up and be here with them. And that's a huge part of it. But there's also that other part of my why of like, I don't know how to exist in this world without sharing what I share because
Mm.
it has been such an important part of my life. And I know the impact that it has on other people. And so it just wouldn't feel right not to do it. So I think coming back to that why is another really big part. And like just not giving up. Just not giving up. That's been such a huge part, just the willingness to show up over and over and over again.
Mm.
Um, has been huge.
Well,
Yeah.
that grit is such a fundamental. The people who make it are the people who have the grit to show up time and time again. And I've been in business this year for 30 years, and it is not uncommon for me to think, why am I doing this? But like you said, having that overarching why, that's why we make such an emphasis of having a clear vision for your business and having a clear 12-month vision, because I don't often show up for me. I show up for the people that I'm committed to. That is my why. If left to my own devices, I would be sitting in New York, dining and whining and
Yes.
doing those things, which, I can build into my life. But what I really want to do is I want to contribute to the people that are important to me. You are such a natural communicator. You're such an incredible teacher, Erica, that I love that part of your why is I have this thing inside me. And it's a gift for all of us to have exposure to that. So I'm very grateful for what you do, as I'm sure are your clients and your members, and the
Thank you.
people who have the pleasure of whether they listen to your podcast or they're listening to this interview, to have you give that gift in the wonderful, clear way that you do.
Thank you. That's lovely to hear.
You're welcome. All right. Tell our listeners how they can connect and work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is kind of branded in the same way. So you can find me just on my website, which is ericawebb.com.au. Instagram is probably where I hang out the most,
Okay.
which is Erica Webb _self-kind. As Susie said, I have a podcast, which is self-kind as well. And my two, like the three ways that I work with people, one is one-on-one, and that's really if people are feeling like, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on. I just want to work through it. I want to figure out how to get my head and my body to kind of be more on the same page. That is one option. I work with people one-on-one.
Is that in person or online?
Both.
Both?
Yeah. So I
Got it.
probably do 95% online, but I do have a little office space in Croydon North in Melbourne. So I see people in person as well. I run a 6-week course, as we talked about, which runs like 3 times a year. So happening in February and May this year. And I run the Self-Kind Hub, which is my online membership, which is really kind of like we said, that step, it's not a step down, but it's just a little bit more hands-off. We have monthly master classes where we dive into some of these topics, and then there's just a huge library of movement practices to help you, shift all that tension that we accumulate after a day of being at the desk, but also infused with that way of connecting with ourselves that is self-kind and curious and compassionate.
So whether you need that real intense one-on-one support, or whether you're looking to get a result in a short period like 6 weeks, or whether you want to be part of something that's continuous, that holds you accountable over time, there's something in the self-kind world that you can tap into. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a link to all the places that you can find Erica in the show notes associated with this episode, and I'll give you the details of that a little later on. Erica, is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Just to thank you, Susie. I really delight in being part of your world and your network. So thank you for, kind of being along for the journey. It's been quite a few years, and I'm just really grateful for you. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening, for getting to the end. I appreciate it.
A big thank you to Erica for sharing her wisdom and her insights today. Her approach to integrating self-kindness into our business and our personal lives is so refreshing and really transformative. And I hope today's conversation inspires you to embrace self-kindness as a core element of your business journey. Taking care of yourself isn't just good for you. It's good for your business too. And that's some advice that I need to be taking too, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Now, this month, our conversation inside the HerBusiness Network is all about this idea that taking care of you, up-leveling your knowledge, your connections, your self-care, your mindset, your connections. I said that twice. It must be important. It's an essential part of growing your business. So this week, we released our monthly growth guide. Now, our growth guides are a curated range of webinars, podcasts, blueprints, worksheets, and more that we make available free to our members. Every month, we focus on a different area, and this month is all about you and your personal development. We're even running a challenge called Get Seen, which members are loving because they're getting accountability to grow their visibility. It's a lot of fun, and it's not too late to join us. You can just head on over to herbusinessnetwork.com to join the network and get instant access to all the goodness that's happening inside the group. Now, for more insights and resources from today's episode, including all of Erica's contact information, head over to herbusiness.com/252. That's herbusiness.com/252. And remember to subscribe to the podcast if you're not already a subscriber for more episodes on how to grow your business while keeping your sanity and your joy intact. I'll see you next time right here on the Her Business podcast. Bye for now.